Welcome to Stories After Midnight. Today we're going to be reading a story called It Was Buried in the Basement. This has been submitted by Jarrett. I hope you enjoy it. A huge shout out to my patrons for helping make this episode possible. And thank you, Jarrett, for sending this one in. Let's get started. Snow whipped across deserted streets, the harsh winter unrelenting in its ferocity. Two young boys bunched up their coat collars and climbed the wrought iron gate to the church's courtyard. They landed with a thud, crunching the thin layer of ice that had built up from the night's bombardment. In a stealthy crouch, they made their way into the church, the massive wooden door stiff and difficult to open. It closed behind them with a slam, and they cringed, hoping no one would become wise to their intrusion. Nothing stirred, and the boys stood still in the desolate hallway. The wide expanse was pitch black with shadows that swallowed light. The quaint New England town had never seen weather this frigid. Temperatures ran in the negatives, making any outside venture treacherous, if not outright deadly. It was to this end the boys cupped their hands in front of their mouths and blew into them, savoring the meager amount of warmth. They carried on, past the congregation halls, the confessional booths, and the living quarters for the clergymen, until they stood atop the steps leading down into the basement. As they stared down the stairway to oblivion, they saw nothing but darkness. Against their better judgment, they descended the heavy stone steps one at a time. Shadows stirred along the walls, as if disturbed by their presence. Finally, they reached the bottom and they moved forward slowly into the basement, allowing their eyes to adjust to their new surroundings. Something felt off down here. Surely the rumors weren't true, were they? It was just an urban legend. No one was really buried down here. A cemetery below a church? It was ridiculous. Yet, after a handful of steps, the lack of light became disorienting, and they found themselves turned around. They made an attempt to go back, retracing their steps exactly, but found the stairs that had been there only moments before had now vanished. No matter what direction they headed, the boys could not find them. Arguments flared, with one of the boys suggesting that they cry out for help, and the other determined to press on. They split up. The confident boy set out in the darkness, while the other huddled against a cold stone wall, his knees tucked up to his chin. The boy who'd set out trekked through the cavernous basement, with its high ceilings and foggy atmosphere. Strange paintings decorated the walls, demonic, evil pieces, showing men and women torn to shreds, fire-consuming flesh, and perhaps, most unsettling, a pale, thin creature sucking at the neck, draining the body of blood. It was at this point that the boy lost his nerve. He knew the legend was true. It was held in this basement, and the prospect terrified him. As he flailed about in the darkness, calling out for his friend, his back bumped into something hard and metal. He cried out in shock and surprise from the scare. He turned, seeing a burial site in the middle of the stone floor of the church. An old wooden coffin, long decayed from the jaws of termites, ensnared by a rusty metal mortsafe to dissuade grave robbers. The lock had long since eroded away. Before he had time to react, the coffin bucked and a muffled sound filtered through its flimsy boards. Not a scream or howl like one might expect, instead a faint whimper like an old man on a street corner. The boy backed away in uncomprehending horror as the lid of the coffin delicately opened, with an agonizingly drawn-out creak. A long, spindly finger slithered out. The nail was yellow and untrimmed, the flesh veiny and so white it could have been albino. The contrast with the surrounding darkness only added to the boy's terror. The thing's face emerged from beyond the confines of the coffin, with its sallow eyes and long fangs. No, not fangs like a vampire, but tusks like a walrus. The thing had to lift its chin to get them to clear the lip of the coffin. It spilled out like an old laundry sack and fell to the ground with a wet slap. The smell was nauseating. Its emaciated body was slender, so much so that it had no trouble sliding its frame through the bars of the mortsafe like a child through a womb. The thing crawled on its stomach. It had legs, but they were so brittle and malnourished that it was doubtful that they could support any amount of weight. They dragged on the floor behind the thing, as it crawled on its hands one after the other, making dreadfully slow progress. It made hardly a sound, except for loose flesh sliding and tusks scraping against stone. As it crawled, it left behind a trail of glistening, snotty residue like a snail. The boy screamed and ran blindly into the darkness, the fog disorienting. He shouted for his friend. A reply filtered back, yet it sounded distant, like he was standing on the opposite side of a canyon. He ran faster until he was sprinting. His footsteps echoed off the stones. Suddenly, an explosion of pain rammed into his face and nose. He fell backwards, landing squarely on his shoulder blades. Tasting warm copper, he knew his nose was broken. The wall stared back at him. He'd been so focused on the thing that he hadn't even seen the wall right in front of him. He'd ran right into it at full speed. He gagged and coughed, spraying a mist of crimson up into the air. Breathing was nearly impossible, but through vision blurred with tears, he stumbled back upright. Knees quaking, he heard the squelching flesh drag against the floor. He squinted into that foggy gray darkness and saw the faintest white outline of the thing coming towards him. He screamed again, but his shattered nose made it sound more like a wail. The thing was by no means fast, and if he could just manage to find the stairs again, he'd make it out of here. Sprinting past it, he desperately wanted out. Suddenly, an earth-shattering, agonized shriek filled the basement. Not from the thing, but from his friend. The boy shouted for him again, but this time there was no response. He ran but hit another wall. He stopped himself and turned to his right, keeping his left palm against it for guidance. Another wall. Wait. What? When he'd first entered the basement, it was much larger than this. Then the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He'd traversed it in less than 10 steps. The room was shrieking, but how and why couldn't he find the stairs again, or even the burial site? Claustrophobia smothered him like a wet blanket as he continued to sprint, keeping his hand on the wall in a desperate attempt to orient himself. Another wall, this time in only 5 steps. Then he heard the thing crawling towards him. He flung his head around and saw it a mere 10 feet away, slowly gaining. Another petrified scream as he ran again, but hit another stone wall in only 3 steps. The room seemed to pulsate and close in around him like a hangman's noose around a condemned neck. He was trapped. The thing stopped in the middle of the floor. The boy could see all 4 walls making up the tiny square, his prison cell, his execution chamber. He pressed his back against the wall and could feel it pushing him towards the center, towards the thing. It didn't move, it just lay there and wait. In a desperate attempt, the boy turned and tried climbing the wall, but the masonry work was too precise, and he could find no foothold in the smooth ridges between the stones. He screamed again as he felt a cold, wet hand grasp the cuff of his pant leg. Kicking and flailing his body, he desperately fought the thing off, but its grip was ironclad. The thing jerked its arm back, and the boy felt his balance give way. He fell to the ground hard, kicking up a cloud of dust as the thing whimpered. It was then he saw the blood everywhere, coating the tusks from their jagged tips to where they connected to the pulpy flesh of its rotten mouth. The boy screamed as the thing ever so slightly rose its head and brought the tusks down in one fatal jerk. That's the end of the story. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know in the comments below, and like this video if you liked it. Hey, listen, you know what I heard? And this doesn't apply to you on Spotify or anywhere else on the podcast because y'all are killing it over there, at least. That's what the stats say. But look, I heard the YouTube algorithm made fun of your haircut. So we can't let that happen, right? Like the video, because it would absolutely hate it if other people saw this video and knew that YouTube was making fun of people's haircuts. So we as a community, we can't stand for that, can we? So maybe do the world a favor. Like the video, share it around. Let's get the word out. And a huge shout out to my patrons. If you'd like to help fuel my pizza and chicken shawarma addiction, there is a Patreon for that, and I'd appreciate it if you think about contributing. But obviously, you just keep being you. You just keep listening, and that is fine enough for me. I hope you enjoyed this stuff. And if you'd like to come join our Discord, well, you can do that too. It's pretty chill over there. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed yourself here. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, then maybe we'll see you in the next one. So take care now. Bye-bye then.